Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Jessica Craho with your Employment First Leadership team in the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. We're so excited that you're here today for Discovering the Genius of the Family with Katherine Carroll. Before I get started, I'll take care of a couple housekeeping things. Believe it or not, we are in August, and this is the last webinar of the 2018 season. Honestly, I can't think of a better way to wrap things up, kind of save the best for last, in my opinion. But before we go on, I want to give a really big thanks to the Employment First Leadership team and all the partner agencies that they represent, and to David and VR for their leadership. A special thanks to IACP for lending us their wonderful platform and GoToWebinar, and to the dozens of partners who presented, sharing their experiences and expertise in an effort to make us all better. And then, of course, to all of you who participate month in and month out as you strive for continued learning and excellence in the work that you do. So we really appreciate you all. We'll be recording today's session, and I'll be sure to disseminate that along with Katherine's presentation. Don't forget about the archive on the YouTube channel. You just search on YouTube, the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment, and you should find the archive dating back to, is it 2013 now? I can't remember. We've been doing it for so long, but there's a lot of great material there that's accessible to you and at your leisure. You can receive continuing education or certificate of participation for attending today. So please just give me a shout out if you need that. And then don't forget about the poll or the survey that launches right after the end of the webinar to give us your feedback. We always appreciate that. So as Katherine and I were chatting in preparation for today, we talked about where Iowa was at. Of course, we talked about the rule changes in employment services, WIOA, the settings, and managed care, and then the impact that's had to persons with disabilities and their families and guardians, the providers of service, and all the partners in employment, both the good and the bad. So as our service systems continue to shift and change along with service provision, and we continue to refine our approaches and increase our expectations in the direction of individualization and inclusion, I'm often wondering, how can we better support families to hold their story strong amidst all the changes and turnover? And I got that from Katherine. I think that's just so great. How can we understand and identify, and in turn, help families understand and identify that they are themselves employers and resources towards a job or job resources? How can we identify and capitalize on the skills, the strengths, and the genius of the families that we work with? Well, that's what Katherine's here today to help us learn, right, or relearn. After I introduce and turn it over to Katherine, please be thinking about and share with us there in the chat pod any questions you might have. Katherine and I are hoping that you'll share what you're finding out and learning about families in your work, some of the challenges they're facing or the challenges that you face as you partner with them. What concerns do you have about or for families? So please be thinking about that, and don't hesitate to share, as we'd like to kind of integrate that into the discussion today. And Katherine really liked to answer your questions and share her perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce and turn it over to Katherine Carroll of 21st Century Rehabilitation Strategies. Katherine is a speaker and an author and parent to Mikkel. She has a lot of great experience in special education as a teacher and a school administrator, as well as a program director for supported employment program. I had the pleasure of seeing Katherine last year at our APSE conference and just loved her breakout session, took so much from it. And so we're happy to have her back here today to share more of that with us. So Katherine, please take it away.
Well, thank you. For those of you, I'm not from Iowa, I'm from Denver and have grown up in the West and have spent the bulk of my life here, but have traveled quite a bit around the country and outside of the country. And one of the things I think that in that experience is that I tend to be curious. And one of the things I'd like you to put on your curious hat today and just kind of think about entering into a different when you work with families. And I want you to think about it as from a cultural perspective and understand that we have many cultures who experience disability. And I think sometimes being an Anglo woman, I tend to look at it from my experiences. One of the things I'm trying to be much more sensitive to is understanding that we have communities in our metropolitan area that have 29, 30 different languages. Our local community hospital, they speak 27 different languages there. So in some of the work that we did on when I was chair of the Developmental Disabilities Council here, we had some projects that worked with families who were recent immigrants and from Burma and from other places that you normally would not think of, and how to engage the system when you are from a completely different culture makes all of what I'm going to tell you today even more challenging. But there's a great source of community and network there that if we can tap into that, we can really help a broader range of people who experience disability. And I just wanted to remind people of that, because sometimes I think we tend to look at disability in too narrow of a lens, and that's just because there's so many of us who come from a similar background who are working in the field. So there you go, just a little bit about that. You're going to learn a little bit about me as a person as we go through here, because as families go, we tend to see people at meetings. We tend to bring them to our organizational place of gathering, and we don't really get an insight into how that family feels. And I remember when I was working with job coaches, when I was running an employment program, one of the things I always told my job coaches was, I want you to walk in their office and I want you within 3 minutes to tell me everything you know about that person. And I'd have them look at the pictures on the wall. I'd have them look at how they were dressed. I'd look at whether it was a beautiful setting or if it was kind of a, cinder blocks and shelves and a big stereo. I would try to tap into how that person learns, how they see the world. I would try to find a point where I could connect with them. And I remember one gentleman in particular that I was working with, and he had an appointment to go visit a fairly well-established businessman, and there wasn't much on the wall, but he was well-dressed and he had a nice office with lots of windows, so that told me that he was fairly high up in his organization. And there were pictures of him hunting. Now, I'm not a hunter, neither was the job coach I was supporting at that time, but we started asking him about hunting. Tell me about your hunting. Tell me about where you go. Who do you go with? All these kinds of things, because that was a point of interest to him. And that relaxed him in a way that we could begin to talk about some of the other things, which was hiring people with disabilities. And so think about how the families that you know, how you can connect with them on the very basic things without even really saying too much to them. So that's just a little thing in my computer is just not wanting to shift page. There we go. All right. So I want to kind of share with you a little bit about what we're going to try and do today. We're going to try to find some quick and easy ways to connect with parents and family. And I just gave you an example of that. We're going to try to find that family genius, because what we're trying to create is a culture of capacity. And unfortunately, a lot in our system, we look at deficits rather than capacity. Now, the nice thing about customized employment for those employment first people and job developers and support employment people is we're looking at finding an individual's genius, but we often ignore the family. And what is kind of intriguing to me is that genius for that individual that you're serving, that genius came from his family, somewhere along that line. It either was a genetic or an environmental genius that they picked up. And so wouldn't it be helpful to us to understand a little bit more about the family so that we would understand more about the individual that we're supporting? The other thing I want to really hit hard is, and I co-chair our Employment First efforts here in Colorado, and I'm also serve on the State Rehab Council, is the more and more we think about our Employment First strategies, the more we begin to think about financial management, benefits management. And instead of using that as an add-on, I'm beginning to think that that is the first place that we go to. Because if we can answer the questions about the finances, families will be much more open to looking at the individual genius and the opportunities to start working. But money freaks parents out, and that for a good reason, for a very good reason. There's a lot that can change on the benefits. And to let you all know, parents are frightened to pieces now. I stay connected to a lot of families here, and we are probably at our highest levels of stress that we have been in years. And it's just because so many things are changing. So the stress that you're feeling, we're feeling too. The future is uncertain. And so what I hope to help you do is help create a bit of certainty in this very uncertain time, because we really don't know where things are going. But the power of advocacy and getting parents involved is probably what helped postpone the electronic visit verification. There was parents calling their senators and their representatives and saying, this is crazy. This is not going to work for us. Do you understand the issues around electronic visit verification? And that is really an intrusive kind of thing into our family and to our individual's life. And that was not something that had really been considered. So advocacy and getting people to make those phone calls and to spring to action is one of the things that I want to hope in an hour's time or less than an hour's time help you get a handle on. As I was telling Jessica, I think a full day of this kind of thing would be really beneficial to people, so that we can give parents some actual tools to have, and that they can begin to manage. So the next part is, what are the 10 things that you never say to a parent? And we'll save that the best for last there, so hang on for that one. And I have colleagues, respected colleagues around the country, and I can guarantee you almost every one of them has done the number one thing that I don't like people to do. And they're pretty embarrassed when they find that they've done it. And I want you to think about parents being the best job developers. And this goes to the turnover issue that Jessica and I were talking about. Mikkel has, since she moved in on her own in 2007, has had over 50 different people live with her or support her. And so in 11 years, that's a lot of hellos and goodbyes. So one of the things I'm going to touch on a little bit is the fact that individuals with disabilities and their families have low trust. And there's a reason, because they have so many hellos and goodbyes. And not all of those are good goodbyes. And not all of them are good hellos. And there's just a natural progression of people moving in a mobile society, much more so than they ever did. We've had people that have stayed in Mikkel's life for 10 years. We've got one that's been in there for 6 years. So there's some tricks to helping keep people and provide a more stabilizing environment for your family member. But it does come at a price for the family. And so we have to understand, for us to move an individual's life forward, we might actually push a family's back. And so I think the notion of family support planning with employment is a good idea. We don't want to create a post-traumatic disorder for families by having their child go to work. And if we don't do that correctly, we can create more problems than we solve. And so I want to touch on that briefly for you. And boy, my computer is just not wanting to move forward. I'm not sure what the deal is there. I'm going to escape out of this and see if I can. Nope. I think you may have to move that forward from, well, you can't do that. It's not moving forward.
Let me see.
It's locked.
See if I can get, I'll try to get it open here on mine, and maybe we can switch screens.
Yeah.
Try that, maybe.
Let's see. There we go. Okay, there we go.
Did it work for you? Perfect.
I'm not sure what happened.
We'll see, right? We'll see.
Working with families, we have to become master communicators, and communication's under assault right now anyway, because we're putting it into 140 characters, and this drive-by communication is not something that really works for families. It's a good supplementary strategies. Social media is great. We go to it all the time. We are on our smartphones. We are talking to each other. We do tell stories, and I guess one of the things that I would, we want to set that up is we want to be able to tell good stories, because unfortunately a lot of stories are spread that are not positive stories, but we want to help people tell good stories, and we want to give them good results. And we want to create a community of support for families and individuals with disabilities and the people that are working with them. And that can come outside of the disability community. And one of the things that I think is just absolutely important is that we bring people outside of the disability field into other people's lives. And what's so cool is that families know people outside of disability, but we don't often ask them to ask those people to get involved. And person-centered planning, when it works, is a good first step to engaging people outside of the field. When I know, and if you want to go to our website, it's www.theshiningbeautifulseries.com. I've got some videos up on how we created our community through using group action planning, and how we invited our hairdresser, our banker, people from all sorts of walks of life that we encounter. Baristas. We love baristas. Mikkel's life has changed because of Starbucks, and it's been a powerful place for us to connect with people who are very good at community. So we look for that, and we help families find places where they can become regulars, and that they can get support from people that are happy to see them all the time, and break up that cycle of isolation that can happen for that. So community and people are really important parts of that. So that communication is really important. And part of that little story I told you about the hunter is learning how to listen and to observe and picking up cues. And we're pretty good at that with people with disabilities. And we've got a person that we're working with that is nonverbal. We watch everything. If our eyebrow raises, we're going, whoop, what's up? Something's on. Or, if somebody starts, twirling something, we kind of say, oh, maybe they're getting a little agitated. Or if they smile unexpectedly, we say, oh, we might have discovered something that we didn't know here. This person enjoys this kind of thing. We have to look at those same signals for families, because families are not going to tell you the truth right away. They're just not, because they don't trust you. And so what we want to do is look for the other cues that they do, the language they use, the things they surround themselves, as I said, their physical possessions. And for fathers, we may not want to meet with them at an agency. They may not even show up. They might not even show up at home, but we have to kind of figure out, maybe we meet them in the garage while they're doing stuff. A lot of men process information by movement. They're physical learners. So when we understand that about them, we might need to go for a walk with them, or hang out in the shop with them, or wherever that they feel most comfortable. That's often why a lot of business is done on golf courses, because men do process by movement. And it's a little stereotypical, because there are women like that too, but it is a more predominantly male characteristic. Women tend to connect through food, through a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. They like eye-to-eye contact, where men tend to like parallel communication. That's why bars are built the way they are, so men can sit next to each other without looking at each other in the face. So, and some of you are probably giggling right now because you know people like that. And so think about how we communicate with people, because we tend to take our way of communication and impose that on families. And we tend to not look at us going into another culture. And what is that cultural? What are their cultural norms? And even if I were to go to Canada or to Mexico or to countries in Europe or where, I would be very respectful of that culture. So think about when you're preparing to meet with a family, Google them. See what comes up. See if you can find some backstory on families and see what their history is. So my rule of thumb is I'm a big quantum physics kind of person, and as you'll find, you know, for being a special needs mom, I have fairly complex interests, and you're going to find out a little bit more. But I have learned that for Mikkel to get what she needs, I have to engage my community and her community, and you'll see engagement equals my community squared. So when we engage in our communities, we actually electrify goals. We break out of the Newtonian A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we begin to create enough energy that we take that quantum leap. And to give you an example of that, Mikkel was always the first one in all of her schools. When we moved into Denver from the suburbs, she was the first person that had been in regular education in each one of her schools. Now, Mikkel can't walk or talk without technology. And augmentative communication was just coming out when she was in school, in elementary school. So she didn't grow up with that. We had to kind of learn how to do all that. But we also didn't receive Medicaid services until she was 11. So, and our insurance didn't cover anything related to her therapy or her wheelchairs or her communication devices. And so I first got my first inkling of how this works when she needed a communication system. The school district had given her one for evaluation, and after 90 days, they took it away from her. And I had been fighting and fighting with the school district to get her into the regular classroom and to give her an experience, because this was at the very beginning of inclusion. And I was tired of fighting, and I went to the school principal and I said, you know, I've run out of resources. We have bought wheelchairs from the community. I've tapped into every community organization I know to get her what she needs. I have run out of ideas. So it's okay not to know how, and that's what I want you to pay attention to here. And you just start asking how. How do I do this? So I went to the school principal and I said, you know, Mikkel really needs this communication device. It's $4,500, and as a single mom, I don't have it. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, but why don't we put a little thing in the school newsletter, and why don't you talk to the PTO? Because the school that Mikkel was going to was one of the best schools in the Denver public schools. And there were a lot of people who had wealth that were nearby. And I thought, well, maybe these people know an organization. So I went to talk to the PTA, and they were no help at all. And so I was pretty discouraged. A week later, the principal calls me and he said, well, he said, I have good news and bad news. And I said, well, give me the bad news. And he said, the bad news is nobody knows, no organizations that will be helpful. We put it out there. We haven't gotten anything back. And I said, great. So what's the good news? He said, I have a check here for $2,500. And this is back in you know, the early 90s. So $2,500 is quite a bit of money. And I said, well, how did you come upon that? And he said, your daughter has provided so much education to this classroom, and this one parent has observed that and the changes that they have seen in their children with Mikkel in the school. And he works for a technology firm, and he understands the value of technology, and he did not want her to go without it. And I'm just blown away. And so I went to the communication people at, the augmentative communication therapists, and I said, we have a check for $2,500. What do you think we can do? And these therapists had run into nothing. They had seen no resources whatsoever that would be helpful for her. But now that we had some money, you begin to change people's ability to see things when you have some success like this. And they started digging a little deeper. And they found a fund at the Colorado, not on the district level, but at the state level, that would provide another $1,000. Well, we're at $3,500. We still are $1,000 short. What do we do? So they go to the manufacturer of the communication device, then it was a MinSpeak, and said, look, we got $3,500. This family has no extra resources. There's no insurance. There's no Medicaid. What can you do? And they said, look, we can give you a closeout price. So for $3,500, we engaged our community, and she got her communication device. Now, getting a family to ask for what they need is kind of a challenge, because families tend to think that they need to do it all. But if you frame it in what's best for your child, your individual, they'll tend to do what's best for their kid. And it'll, even if it puts them in a place where they'd be very uncomfortable. Now, I was never comfortable asking for things, but I've learned that I just have to ask the questions. Yeah, how do I get Mikkel this device? Do you have any ideas? And if you even go into families and say, you know, we're trying to get John or Caleb a job, or Sarah, do you have any ideas? Because they've talked about employment. It's a great question. It's a great coaching question. This is the goal. Do you have any ideas? And that gives us a chance to do that communication and engage the community. So go to the barber. Hey, you know, John wants a job. And, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Do you have any ideas? This is kind of what he or she likes to do. And you can take the family with you so you can begin to train them on how to ask those questions. But there are answers in the community that are not existing in the system. So I want you to begin to think about shaping your discussion with families and changing the expectations, is that we're not going to take care of it for you, but we're going to help you take care of it. And we're going to provide you the support and the resources necessary so you begin to manage the long picture. We're here for the short term. You're here for the long term. Let's help you. So let me share with some other family stories besides mine. But recently, it's been 4 years now, a group of us came together who our kids use technology. And we kept going to the system saying, hey, you know, our kids use technology. I don't see you talking about technology in their support plans. I don't see you, you know, providing them options, particularly adult children. We're not finding a lot of resources there. And we pretty much didn't get a lot of support from the system. And so we began to figure things out ourselves. And so I want you to meet on the left of your screen, there's Alice, Kara, and Jim, and they live in a town of 3,000 in rural Colorado, western Colorado, up in the mountains, Glenwood Springs. It's about 50 miles or so from Aspen. So it gives you kind of an idea where they're. Very different than Aspen, a working town. People are more just hard workers. They work for the highway department. They work for the city or the college. It's a very local community. Beautiful hot springs. Wyatt Earp used to go to their hot springs, and Doc Holliday. So it's got a lot of history to it. So Kara is in the pink, and Kara was 5 years old when she was injured in a ski accident. A young man going too fast on the ski slope hit her in the head, and she nearly died. She was in a coma for a couple months, and she came out with a brain injury. Now, the system didn't know how to support her too well, but and they tried to put her in 24-hour support services, and she began to have some behaviors, and that wasn't working really well. So Alice had heard about this one family who had developed a computerized system that Kara their daughter Stacy would tell her what to do, because Kara had lost a lot of her executive functioning skills. So the little voice inside her head was not talking to Kara. And so she didn't know where to go from next thing, and she just got real frustrated. So Alice had taken the basics of the system, gotten an iPad, got a 99-cent app, and they programmed all that little detail about time to get up, and Kara would put in her own voice and put her own song in there that would wake her up in the morning, and time to let the dog out, and it would walk her through all the things that she would do in her day, and it would cue her. And then they were able to get some cameras, and they were able to get her own place, and she lives pretty independently. And Women's Day just did an article on the mother of invention. So we want to unlock that power within a family. Now, Alice is a nurse. She's just retired. And Jim was a nurse too. And what's interesting now is he developed a brain tumor, and his health is not great, and he has some memory issues. So now with the smart speakers, Alice is pioneering how to use that to help support both her daughter and her husband around that. And so getting families engaged can change people's life. So what Allison and I got together, and we started talking about technology, and we need to do more. And then we talked to the next family over here, which is Max. And Max, they call him Big Air Max. And Max had an accident when he was 18 months, and he choked on some popcorn and nearly died. And Max cognitively is still there, but his physical ability is extremely limited. And technology had opened up for him. And what was really nice is, as you can see, local filmmakers share Max Grange's inspirational story. They engaged their community. They actually did a motivational or a short documentary on Max with excellent equipment at the Film Institute in Aspen. And now Max has got his story out there. Max he raised $110,000 at an international Rotary Club by himself. So unlocking that power to do things. So we don't have to do it all. We just have to make sure it gets done. And we want to unleash that genius that each of these families have. The next picture is my daughter, Mikkel. And you'll notice the American flag next to her. And she is speaking as a Colorado delegate for the Social Security Beneficiaries Conference. And she was selected out of 8 million people to represent the Ticket to Work at the National Press Conference, or National Press Club. And she was also able to talk to the House Appropriations and the Senate Finance Committees about how people like her want to work and want to make money. And her conversations help lead to some of the things like the ABLE Act. So we've got different stories of how we empower. So here is Jill and Sam. Sam experiences autism. And Sam is in school. He's a bit challenged with some of those things, but he's doing really, really well. And because of his autism, Jill has gotten very involved in the educational programs. And she just started asking questions, started getting involved, started showing up. She was appointed to the Colorado ARC Board, and now she is helped start 3 rural ARCs on the western tip of Colorado. So she's gotten very involved, and she's part of our family's technology. Now Sally, and this is one of her folks that is helping her run what's called the Yellow House. And Sally took in a different text. She said she has a son with autism also, and she was wondering about the future. So she living in Aspen, it's a great outdoor. She started Ski Aspen, and it was an outdoor education program for people with disabilities, and it since has morphed into a program called Ascendigo, and now they're providing employment start. So she actually became a provider, and she built the Yellow House, and it was a house in Carbondale that is an old Victorian that they had gutted basically, and they developed a sensory-friendly environment for 3 gentlemen with autism, who the walls are thick. They've got a wet bathroom so they can clean it up easily. They've got different areas that people can go to when they need time to themselves. So she's pioneering independent living for people with autism and doing some very cool things. So these are 5 families that their power has been unleashed, and look at what they're doing. It's amazing. So let me tell you a little bit more about Mikkel. As you can see, these are pictures of my daughter Mikkel and with her community. Mikkel was adopted at 3 months from Korea. She was the first one in elementary school, middle, and high school to be fully included in regular education. She graduated outstanding senior from her East High School, where her grandmother and her brother and her nephew her nephews are now attending, and she's been working since she was 16 years old. She had a past plan. She owns her own home, and as I mentioned, she has a nice net value in her home right now. She has more money than I do. She bought her accessible van, and she is an author, presenter, and a jewelry designer. And you can see she's also politically active. That was Mikkel when we had the Democratic Convention here, and she was at the Obama acceptance speech back then. But just look at the variety of people in her community. Just take a minute and look at those pictures. She's got young, fun people. She is engaged. We have regular parties, so we invite people and keep them posted. When Mikkel's one of the gals that's not pictured in this was a barista at Starbucks, and when we were looking for Mikkel's next iPad before those were paid for, we had another group action planning opportunity, and we invited people over to look at Mikkel's next set of goals, because she had achieved the goal of home ownership, of getting her own van, of becoming a presenter and having a small business, and she had wanted a service dog, and that's the only one that she didn't get. And she accomplished all that in 8 months because we engaged the community, and that empowers a goal in dramatic ways. And so we asked the group about how do we get Mikkel an iPad, and one of her baristas named Chelsea, and Chelsea's mother had been tragically killed by a drunk driver, and she had been one of the longest tenured professors at the community college in Denver. And she said, you know, my mother would want me to get this for Mikkel. And so she took some of her inheritance, and they walked down to the Apple store, and together they bought Mikkel's first iPad. And that became Mikkel's next level of communication system. Never the system to pay for that. So when you're going through all these systems changes that you're experiencing, as we all are, I don't want you to think that supports stop. We just have to find another way to get the things that people need. And when we understand the power of the family's network and the individual's network, they'll show up for small things like this. They're not going to provide the daily support. That's not going to happen, but they can fill in the gaps, and that's engaging the family to ask their community to support them. And oftentimes people cherish the ability to do that. Okay, so I got this new thing as I was going to the APSE conference in Iowa last year, and I was thinking, what do I need to do with this presentation? And I realized, you know, we caution people about labeling people with disabilities. We say label jars, not people, yet we label parents all the time. And I bet you agree with that. I just bet you're nodding your heads right now saying, yeah, I'm kind of difficult. I'm good at that. So we often say a parent like me, for instance, you might think I could be a difficult parent. That thought might have crossed your mind. You could say maybe I'm overprotective or too involved, or I'm not realistic. You might have a few labels that somebody might have given, which I've been called all those things. But maybe if we change how we look at people from a deficit, the parental deficits, much like we encourage people to do with people with disabilities, don't look at their disability, look at their ability. Let's start looking at the abilities of families. And let's start thinking, is that mom smart? Is that dad creative? How do we engage that creativeness? This mom is so bright. She's got so many things. But if we can't get past that label of difficult, or we're uncomfortable facing their grief or whatever they've got going on and their lack of trust, then we're losing a tremendous amount of resources that are available to us. And I got to tell you, for all the 5 families I just talked about, the system was not very good at engaging us. We came up and we started a conference because nobody would support us around the technology. And we said, fine, let's see if we can figure this out. I had a good relationship with a senior engineer with Apple, and I got him to come out, and we did a half-day thing at the community library in the Western Slope, and everybody wanted more information. I said, well, it's time to have a conference. Well, when are we going to have it? Well, that was in June. We'll have the conference in October. We don't have any money. No, we don't. We don't have much time. No, we don't. But if we focus and engage our community, we're going to make this happen. So we got a 5-star hotel in Snowmass at the end of their season to give us these highly beautiful first-class hotel rooms for $129 a night. We started asking the banks, we started asking hotels, we started asking insurance companies, anybody with financial planning services. We said, would you sponsor some families to come to this? So we raised our money, and we had our first conference 4 years ago. We just finished in June our 4th conference. And still nobody from the system is picking this up. So we're going to meet on Friday to figure out where we're going with it next, because if we don't follow through with it, it looks like it will not continue. So look at how you can support families and the things that they think are important. And so there you go. Sorry about the snipping tool thing in there. I meant to change that, but I didn't get to it because I'm just been a little busy. But anyway, so family labels, and just take a minute. If you've got a piece of paper there, jot a note or two about a family you are considering working with or have worked with, and then just label them. The first 4 things that come to your mind. Pick 2 families so you'll have different things. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Now, I want you to go to the next step and see how they've engaged in the system and put some labels that you have around families there. And do you have any career labels? Do you even know what they do for a living? And then life labels. If you have enough knowledge about them, and you can put some qualities like, oh, they're adventurous, or, oh, you know, they're hard workers, or, oh, they seem to be stuck. But then you can ask yourself, why are they stuck? How did they get stuck? What happened to them that would make them not want to go forward? So you can use those labels in a way that can help lead you to asking more questions. And why is a good question. I always like to say, use the question why 5 times. And an example of this in consulting circles is a consultant in a factory, a plant manager, were walking through a factory, and they ran across an oil drip in the middle of the concrete floor. And the shop, or the plant manager, called over an employee, said, you need to clean up this oil spill, you know, this is dangerous. And then the consultant said, because consultants are always wise, right? Said, excuse me, why is there this oil puddle? And he said, well, it's coming up there from that pulley up there. And it said, well, why is it coming up there? And he said, well, because we had to replace the gaskets on this pulley that connected to the oil thing and whatever. And he said, well, why did you replace them? And he said, well, because we were told to, and we didn't replace them with the ones that we had used in the past. Well, why didn't you use them, the ones that you'd used in the past? Because accounting told us to cut and save some money. And so we went with the cheaper one. So knowing the whys is really important. So when you run across a family that is not engaging, ask yourself why 5 times and see if you can do it. So you've got some labels about me, and it's a little tough over a webinar to get all the picture of me, but you're probably getting some. You probably formed a few on your head. So let me share with you a little bit more about who I am as a person, and maybe you'll get an idea of what resources I can bring to bear. Can you guys hear me? There we go. Jessica, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good, because I got a little notice that said it might be a connection problem. So just wanted to make sure. Okay, so look at these pictures. These are pictures of me that kind of give you more of a complete one. And remember when I talked about the pictures. So if you saw these pictures in my house, you might start with that black and white one that's kind of blurry and say, who the heck is that? Well, I'd say that was my great-grandfather. And you can see a 6-shooter on there and a horse, and he's in the mountains. He was in the lumber business. He looks remarkably like my father did. And I can tell you a whole lot of stories now because of that one picture. And you can get an idea that I'm a Western girl. If I would have that in my house, that tells me that I really love the West, and I like the Old West. So that gives you a value there. You might jump to the Bronco thing. And there I am with 3 other people, and that's my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. That was the year the Broncos went to the Super Bowl. with Peyton Manning, and they won. And we're still looking for that next win, but that tells me that I have a collective thing. Now, Mikkel didn't go to the parade, but I have a wonderful picture of her in a Bronco wig, and it's hysterical. And so part of our family culture revolves around the Broncos, the Denver Broncos. So, and if you were to go up to the picture up in the far left, the colorful one with the two ladies, and that was in Cartagena, Colombia. And I would be able to share that I have great friends that one of them is Colombian, and I traveled to Colombia to visit them, and I could tell you stories about the old, walled city and the colonialism there and what I did, and you'd have ways to engage me and listen to me and understand that I have kind of an affinity towards the Latin culture. Then you might go down to the one at the very bottom, and you'd see me all lined up with 4 ladies. And they say, "What's that picture about? You got all these sparkles." And I'd say, I'm a salsa dancer. This was me performing at a local nightclub. And a bunch of middle-aged ladies, except for a couple, there were 2 younger ones there, who were dancing at a nightclub in costume and wearing our sparkly shoes and our little fringe dresses. And you would know that I really love to dance, and that has been a big part of me. And then if you keep pursuing that question, I'd say, what other dances do you do? I do West Coast swing, I tango. I love the physical activity and the mental thing. And then if you were trying to convince me of something that I was struggling with, you might say, well, Katherine, it's kind of like the dance. You need a partner. And we're trying to partner with people in the community to help Mikkel. We want her to look as good as you did on the dance floor, in employment, in a new job. Well, what did it take? Well, it took lots of practice. It took learning the basic steps. It took lots and lots of hours, but it was worth every frustrating moment of it. So you can begin to take your world and import it into my world. And then I begin to say, oh, is that all it takes? An example of how that worked from a parental perspective, when Mikkel went to middle school, I approached the school and they said, we don't really think we can educate her here. And I said, well, why is that? Well, we really have never had anybody like Mikkel in our school. But I had done my research, which is an important thing to do, on the principal of this school. And I knew that she had a small disability herself. I knew that she had taught special education, but she went on to administration. And I knew that she'd also had hosted the governor and the education secretary at the school. And so I said, how did you get ready for the Secretary of Education's visit and the governor's visit? She goes, oh, we had an action plan. I said, oh, well, that's all you need from Mikkel. You just need an action plan. She goes, is that all I need is an action plan? I said, that's it. We just sit down, we plan it out, we put together an action plan, and she's in. And that's exactly what we did. So we have to be able to step into the language and the picture. Adults have a way of doing things, and we need to step into their way of doing things. And one of the most powerful things for people to do is to know how people think. So there are a couple other pictures in here. You can see me on the ski slopes, so you can engage with me on how I decide to approach a mountain. I did this with a client that I was working with who was a business owner, as I used to do a lot of executive coaching as well. And she was a competitive skier, and she was just struggling in her business. Said, well, how did you approach a race? And she said, well, these are the things I did. I prepare, I do this. I said, that's what you need to do with your business. So she, oh, okay. So another thing you would see here is I am here marrying 2 people. One of these, the blonde, was Mikkel's roommate. And so she invited us to the wedding, not only to participate in the wedding, she asked me if I would perform the wedding for her. Now, what's interesting about this beautiful blonde is she's delivering a baby today. She also developed aggressive cancer, and we are now supporting her through both her healing, and we've become a community support for her. But you begin to see that there's a loyalty factor here. We stick together. Mikkel's community sticks together, and I stick with my friends. Now you'll see the picture in the middle, And that's my grandson and my son, who is now a CrossFit instructor. My grandson's doing CrossFit, and now I'm doing CrossFit. So you can see that I'm not afraid of a challenge, although I am afraid of a challenge, but I'll do it anyway. And I can now do handstands, which is my big claim with CrossFit. But I love the ocean, and the bottom group of pictures down there is that I'm a writer, and these are my writer friends. And this is us doing a reading at the local bookstore. So there are many places that you could engage me and get me talking about myself so you would learn more about me. And then you begin to understand that Mikkel grew up of writers and performers and adventurers, and that's part of what you'd want to support her in maintaining if you were working with her. And that would be the way to approach. We're a goal-oriented family. So that does not have a larger goal than what they have now, because they wouldn't fit. They don't fit into our family culture. And Mikkel still has goals, and we need people to be, you can't support goals if you're not goal oriented. And that's one of the things that we found the hard way. So anyway, engaging families. As you can see, we have some interesting pictures here of the pioneer families, which is another reference to my family. They did come over in the covered wagons. They did homestead in Steamboat and Aspen and Leadville, and they hauled ore, silver ore, over from Leadville into Aspen. The upper right picture is about a father, and this is his story. His son passed away unexpectedly, and he built this castle by himself in memory.
You're cutting out, Katherine. There you are. There you
go. Okay.
You cut out a little bit there.
Sorry, it must be my internet connection. My Comcast. It's a little flaky sometimes. So the upper one is Bishop's Castle, and it is the story of a parent who lost his child and how he built this castle in tribute to his son. And then you've got this Latino family reading stories and understanding them and understanding the power of family there. But I use this enough model. I've used it for 30 years, and it works every time. If you have a family that's disgruntled, if they're upset and they don't, one of the changes is affecting them, you need to connect with them, because your agenda will not go anywhere until you get them connected with you. And one of the things that you can do is you can be empathetic to what's going on. Oftentimes, case managers are so busy that they don't have the time to connect, and then they become offensive because they don't care. They're just trying to get the boxes checked and get things done. So what we need to do as leaders and compassionate people, you wouldn't be on this call if you weren't compassionate, you're not curious about families, is you want to empathize with where the parent is or the individual is at that point. And this works with people with disabilities very well. You're not judging, you suspend your judgment. And that's hard to do these days, because sometimes people are fairly offensive in our sensibilities. But don't judge. Just try to say, tell me why you feel the way you feel. Tell me how you got there. And try to gain some understanding. That's where these why questions come in very helpful. And do it with sincerity and feeling. So people feel your heart. And once they feel your heart, you can be logical, but you can't be logical before you connect to the heart for most people. Now, there's some folks that like logic. They don't, that heart is not the place that they're going to go. They've guarded it too well, or they're just not that connected to it. So logic is another tool. And when we go back to Mark Gold and Associates, try another way, you try these and you see which one works with this particular family. But that's a powerful model. But one of the things that you want to do when working with families is discover their strengths. And, you know, I find that we are remarkably strong and resilient people. And we live in Colorado. I see people riding their bikes over these 14,000-foot mountains, and I go, oh my goodness, how do you do that? What kind of inner reserve do you have to get yourself up a mountain for fun like that? I can go down a mountain for fun, but you know, riding a bike is a whole different story. like a lot of the West right now, we've had our share of forest fires, and they can be devastating. How does a community come together when they've been hit by a crisis? They suspend their labels. They just work with people to get the job done. And that's what I'm asking you to do as well, is suspend the labels. Just work to get the job done, which is helping support that individual who is a job seeker, who wants to live on their own, who wants to have a better life, and who wants to get out of poverty. That's what we do. We just take people where we can meet them, and we work towards the goal. Don't worry about the other stuff. Well, these are floods and other disasters and tornadoes that people go through, and people pulling trucks, and then also the strength of that same effort going towards creating the Americans with Disabilities Act. These are all stuff that we can do, but identifying a family's strength, and many times it's persistence. Sometimes it's other stuff. So figure that out. So here's your way to bridge the gap, because there is often that chasm, and Al Condalucci used to always talk about, you know, the chasm. You can try to go down the canyon, or you can just build a bridge. So these are bridge building strategies. The Enough model, educate, involve, stakeholder groups, and problem solving. If you are working with managed care, get those stakeholders involved. We have made some fairly significant changes here in Colorado. One of the things that really changed things for us in this state is that after a number of people with disabilities blocked a few offices and hijacked a few meetings, because we have a very powerful ADAPT group here, the state started listening, and they completely changed their culture. And it's been amazing how much involvement. I, along with 2 other moms, get together almost monthly with people at the state and some of the service providers, and we have lunch off-site, out of the offices, where we can all break bread together, share a few details. Nobody's listening. Nobody has to be fearful that they're being watched, and we just talk honestly about what's going on in the system. Those folks now call us and say, you know, we're going to make a policy change. We want to run it by you. Can we meet for lunch? That's the type of thing that you begin to get. And now I serve on as co-chair for Employment First, and which is a legislative supported initiative here, which we didn't think would happen, but one of the reasons it did happen is I was at a particular meeting pushing employment, and it got onto a report to the governor on community living, and it was written into legislation, and a number of people got together. But now, as a parent, I'm shaping employment policy in some fairly powerful ways here in Colorado. And for the first time, I actually have hope for employment here. So that political activism, the roadmaps, understanding how services are delivered here, it's awfully confusing. We had a parent and also an executive director for the Arc of Douglas County talk about all the systems that people must interact with. She came up with 58 of them that people interact with. When money leaves Congress to the individual, there are 58 different hands that touch it. So it's a very complex system, and most families don't understand it. Okay, let's finish up with this last little bit here. 10 things to never say to a parent. Say no, and say it often. If you want to disconnect with a family, just tell them no. A better way would say, I'm not sure how to do that right now, but let's figure it out together. But once you say no, you close the door. It's a done deal. So say it a different way. Say, I don't know how, but let's figure this out together and see if we can find those resources you need. Overpromise and underdeliver, and that's one of the things. I think you can go to your website, you can go to your brochures, you can go to your meetings, check the board and say, are we delivering what we promise? And if you're not, then you need to underpromise. You need to cut back those promises. And I would rather have somebody come to our house and say, look, I'm overworked, I'm underpaid, but I'm here to help you. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but would you be willing to work with me on that? I'd say, yeah, I would, because you're honest with me. If you came to me saying, oh, we're going to do all this stuff, and then I'm expecting you to follow through, and people start canceling appointments and not following up, that's when you've lost me. Tell us how complicated the system is. We know. We've been living with the system since our kids were diagnosed. We know it's complicated, and it's even more complicated for us than it is for you, because we're dealing with multiple systems in a way that in many cases you're not. So that one doesn't fly. Think that we don't have dreams of our own. And one of the reasons why I took the time to go over those pictures of me doing a variety of things is if I didn't have those things, I would not be a very effective parent. I would not be a good role model for my daughter either, because I want her to understand that she has lots of life to live and that my job is to help her do that. Life is beautiful and it's challenging and it's got all of its stuff going on, but she's got to have those good times. She's got to go to those concerts. She's got to go to those movies in the park. She's got to do all the things that she loves to do. And she needs to be respected. And that's one of the things that she needs. But that's also one of the things I need. I need to be respected from my experience. I'm the one that's always there. She's 35 years old. I'm still here. And I want people to understand that that's quite a commitment. And appreciate that commitment. Only focus on short-term planning, and our system is riddled with this short-term planning disease. It's like we're getting to the end of the year. You know, it starts in school, just to the next school, the end of the school year. We get into that 9-month cycle. We get into that year cycle with the annual plan. That is too short-term. And I remember talking to educators about, well, what are we going to do to get her graduated? I said, what we're going to do is we're going to get her prepared to be an adult. Well, that's not our job. I said, yes, it is. That's her transition plan. So she needs to know where she's going to live. She needs to understand your money. She needs to develop friends outside of the system. You need to get us connected to those people that we know, that you know, in Social Security and voc rehab. We need all of that because after graduation, you guys are gone. And we were able to have a very effective transition plan where they met with us 2 hours a month to help her do that. And that's why she graduated Outstanding Senior. And what was really nice is that just last month, through our website, shiningbeautifulseries.com, her teacher from high school found her and sent her a lovely, lovely email about how proud he was of her and how important it was. And we wrote back and said, you know, it started with you. You had a huge contribution to this, and if you never felt like you did, you helped make this happen, even though you were with her for only 9 months. So that's part of it. Fail to assist in financial planning. Again, I started off talking about that financial planning is probably at the core of service delivery, not at the end of it. And so we need to start looking, if you take that circle of support model and you begin to put financial planning in that model, it's a really, really important thing because a job can cost a family money. And if we don't plan for that and help the family understand that this person's going to get off their check, that it's going to change the finances of the family and how they've done things, we're really doing a disservice. And particularly if we don't do those well, because we don't want to put people in an overpayment situation. Tell us that technology is not important for our kids. They don't really care, and that's not true. We need support for that. That is the future for our kids, and we need to really get going on it. We're doing it. We're teaching our kids about technology. We sure like the system to support us in that way. Fail to understand that we grow weary of the endless stream of people. And if you put together, I mentioned 50 people since 2007. Well, Mikkel, you know, was born in 1983. And compound that. All the educators, all the therapists, all the doctors, all those people that we've had to connect with. And if you wonder why we don't have a lot of energy, it's because we've had to put so much energy out prior to your visit. And if you're not going to stay with us, be honest about it. When we went through 4 case managers in less than 14 months, I finally told the last one, I said, we're not telling our story again. How long are you going to stay? She goes, I'm staying. I said, how do I know that? She goes, honestly, I'm staying. Fortunately, she's been with us for 4 years, and that makes a wonderful difference. Fail to understand we are the one constant in our child's life. We are the glue. We are the glue. You may think of that we're stuck. We may be a little bit stuck, but we are the glue that holds it together and deserve that respect that we have. We stick with our kids, and not every family's going to have that ability to do that. and I understand that, and try not to judge them for that. Try to find out where they fell apart. I find fathers often peel off. You know, they'll just go earn the money. They don't get involved, but they don't understand the system. They don't understand the language we use. They don't understand the processes. So try not to do that. Just say, we're trying to get Sarah a job. That's all it is. You know how to get jobs, don't you? Yeah, I do. I've had many of them. Tell me about your jobs. You see how quickly the conversation can turn, rather than say, well, sir, we have this annual plan and we need to make sure we have everything put together in terms of, benefits and all this kind of stuff. That means very little to a lot of people. But finding a job is something that most people can relate to. And the number one thing is, don't call me mom. And I used to bring coffee and donuts to Mikkel's IEP meetings and all these other meetings, and people would say, and Mom, what do you think? And I'm going, my daughter's been going to school for how many years? And you don't even know my name? You can't refer to me by Katherine or Miss Carol? And when you call a parent by their label of parent, mom or dad, and not by their first name, you immediately disrespect them. And they become less part of it. And it becomes more about the professionals and getting through the process. But if you have enough of a relationship to say, Debbie, what do you think? Or John, what do you think? Tom, what do you think? Then it changes it. So don't call folks by their parenting label, because you wouldn't want to be called a job coach, what do you think? Psychiatrist, what do you think? Program director, what do you think? That's my number one. And if you can change that, that'll probably change a lot of things. So what we want to do is start getting parents involved in the employment process and understand that, hello, I am your job developer, love mom. I mean, giving families tools and tips on how they can do that. One of the ways that I like to do them, as I say, go back and get all the little letters that you got from, the teachers and the clergymen and any good note, and begin to put together an electronic portfolio of some kind, and getting the kids at the school to help with that. You get these techie kids who need extra credit for their college exams or college entrance, and start developing partners there and helping people do that. But do a walk through the community and help the families see the different jobs that are out there, because they're going to go and they're going to shop. So if they go to the dry cleaner regularly, go with them to the dry cleaner and develop a relationship, and then show them how to ask about employment opportunities, and they will become your eyes and ears. They'll give you leads in which you can follow up and help. And so those are some of the ways to do that. Understand that parents are great negotiators. We can spot an opportunity and cast a bright spotlight on a dark problem. And we are particularly powerful when we find our kids are not getting what they're supposed to get. So we become great negotiators on that, and we make those things happen. We take charge out of necessity. We don't often see ourselves as leaders. I remember working with a woman who was part of the Mormon church, and she did not see herself as a leader. And I said, well, tell me about your week. And she goes, oh, I'm pretty busy. I've got a Wednesday night church dinner. And I said, well, how many people are coming? 250. Well, who's leading that? I am. I said, you're getting dinner for 250 people together. Yeah, it's not that bad. I said, well, just take that same way, and let's break it down and how you're going to start doing supported employment. And again, using her language and her success pattern to work it out for her. And understand that families have a lot of knowledge about their kids. And if you take the time to spend some time in the house and do that discovery process with the family, you will learn so much. Helping families get started. I always advocate for kids, and particularly when they're in school, to start a launch fund. It may not be a college fund, but it's a launch fund. And you can use ABLE accounts. That's a possibility for people to begin to do that. But you could, begin to look at doing a GoFundMe, starting a microloan fund, doing all sorts of things that can help families have the resources necessary to help fund a small business, or pay for an extra job coach, or pay for some other supports that the system might not be able to. But families will respond to that because they do that for their other kids. Many times they'll do that for their child with disability, but they didn't know they needed to do that. And I always say, look for summer jobs and intern opportunities. And even if it's a couple days, say, somebody likes to take apart small engines, and dad has to take the lawnmower in to get it repaired. Just say, hey, could we hang out here in the shop for a while and watch you do this? And help them create opportunities so that they can get their family member into some new experiences, and see what you can do with that. But important. And if they're still in school, it's important to use extended school year dollars that the school does have available to help pay for a job coach in the summer and start getting them employed before they get out of school. Really important. So here's some low-tech stuff. Help families get their paperwork together. This is a #1 thing. If they go to a voc rehab counselor with an organized portfolio of paperwork, their voc rehab counselor is going to see them as ready for business, and they're not going to brush them off. And what I try to tell families is that you need to be organized. You need to be able to do this. Now let's set this down. We used to give out little file crates with labels. So families they wouldn't have to even do that stuff. They wouldn't have to go to the office supply. That's something that you can do, is provide families with a filing system to help them get that. That gives you an opportunity to really have some discussions over that. And you can say, oh, this is your old IEP. Tell me about that. You can work on that. That is a legitimate service support. Again, contacting voc rehab, engage in these family discussions. Start going over pastplans.org, which shows people using past plans. And then with a bit of luck and a dose of creativity and persistence, you'll find that parents can be good job developers and support you in employing people with disabilities and stuff. A couple other ones is, and I've kind of gone over most of these, and you can have these, but I want to kind of open it up for some questions now. And but help families connect with successful parents. And I still, and I've been in this field for over 50 years now. My daughter's 35, and I still get together with a group of parents, once a month to say, what do you know, and how do we deal with it? Because we've had some real serious issues come up with benefits and Medicaid, and so we talk to each other because they know something I don't know, and I know something they don't know, and we have a coalition and help families get together on that in positive ways. So here's some information. This is my contact information. That's our website, The Shining Beautiful. We've been blogging for 7 years now, so I blog once or twice a month. There's tons of articles on there that you can share with families about everyday things. I've got stuff on ABLE accounts there. I've got stuff on employment. I've got stuff on Section 8. There's just tons of stuff there. We're starting to post videos of Mikkel, doing some fun things around technology, and we're playing with that quite a bit. And then our familiesforefront.org is our technology website. And there you go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katherine. I'll encourage folks to ask any questions, share any comments, ideas, anything. I had several takeaways from today, but I'll just share 2 while I give folks a chance to maybe think or share something. I thought one of the things that stuck out to me, Katherine, was that there's answers in the community that don't exist within our system. And again, kind of reaching out to that community and asking those questions of how and or why, I think were some of the big takeaways for me today. So thank you very much for that. See here if there's anything coming in. So nothing yet. I'll be sure to share the PowerPoint presentation along with Katherine's contact information that's in there, and some of those resources she shared. And I think I captured the your website address there, Katherine. Is that on that last slide as well? The www. Shining, okay, Shining Beautiful series. Okay.
Yeah, I'll eat that up for you guys.
Perfect. Check out that blog.
Yeah, and we're going to start podcasting. And so I will send you information about that. I think
That would be wonderful.
yeah, I think that's going to be our next thing, and we're going to start posting a lot more YouTube videos. And so in September, we're working out our plan now, but Mikkel used to do a lot of presentations around the country, and she used to make up to $700 an hour for her presentations. She loves to make money. Oh my gosh, she just loves to make money. And so she still sells her bracelets, which were mostly local here, but she has a book, and it's the Shining Beautiful series. It's about people who got involved in her life from their perspective. It's a simple little book that she put together and her community put together, and it's how to get people involved who are not part of the disability culture. And it's a nice little book, and it's got some good stories in there. And what's nice is that all those people that book was written, gosh, when was it? 2012 maybe. All those people are still involved with her. Not as much, because they married and they have families now, but they're all still involved. They'll come to the Christmas parties and her birthday parties, and they're there if we need them at any time. So.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll be sure to share all that. And whenever you send me stuff in the future, I'll send it out through the mailing list, like with the podcast and stuff. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today as we wrapped up our 2018 webinar season. Again, thanks to the Employment First team and David and VR, IECP for the platform, all the partners and experts that shared their experiences and information over the course of the year. And of course to you, Katherine, thanks so much for a great day with lots of great information. And to all of you who are on listening today, let me know if you need a certificate of attendance. I'll be sure to send everything out, and then look to hear from us maybe towards the end of the year to see what's going to be happening in 2019 for the Iowa community of practice. So take care, everybody, and have a great rest of the summer. Talk to you soon.
Keep up the great work, everybody. You're welcome. And know that we appreciate all the work that you're doing as families. We really do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.